Do you remember the Addams Family? It really doesn't matter which iteration you've seen, whether it be the older black and white show or the newer movies. Me personally, I've never seen the movies, but I've loved the show, even though I had to watch the reruns since it was originally aired a bit before my time. In any case, I enjoyed it and its quirky sense of humor. Of course, just like everything in the late 80s and 90s, popular things had to have video games. Typically, movies and shows got the short end of the stick when it came to quality games, but who can really blame them? Take your favorite movie. How would you make a video game off of it? Granted, once in a while you get lucky and find something that's actually decent, or maybe even good. But most of the time, movies and shows converted to games don't work out so well. So just like everything else in the era, of course the Addams Family got licensed into multiple games for pretty much every popular console at the time. The one I'm looking at today is simply titled The Addams Family on the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's a simple platformer where you control Gomez and run around the Addams mansion, collecting cash to save the rest of the family. Perhaps calling it a simple platformer is incorrect, because this game is anything but simple. In fact, I'm going to throw out the fact that I needed an infinite lives code just to finish the frickin' game. In any case, it's not a horrible game, just a frickin' hard one. For those 5 people that are unfamiliar with the Addams Family, let me just give you a quick summary. It details, well, the Addams Family, a group of strange people that have some really odd hobbies and pastimes. For example, Morticia, the mother of the household, takes care of a garden full of Venus flytraps. Uncle Fester is known for lighting up a light bulb just by putting it in his mouth and blowing in it. And then you have one of the kids, named Wednesday, who enjoys torturing her dolls. Because of all these quirks, they don't really get many visitors. But this is also where the game comes in. You play as Gomez, who needs to collect $1 million and save a few members of the family. Now, why would they need this money? Well, apparently they got evicted by their lawyer, who wants their cash. So Gomez starts out on his quest on the outside of the mansion, which is of course locked at first. So you need to head all the way across the garden and jump down into a crypt to fight a skeleton. The skeleton is holding the front door key, and once you gain access to the house, it's where the game really starts. It's fairly open, and allows you to choose where you want to go. Every room has some important object in it, whether it be an item or cash. And since the game is non-linear, yes, there will be backtracking, and potentially a lot of it. See, the game really doesn't give you much instruction. When saving a member of the Addams Family, they may give you a slight clue on what to do next, but it's not always a clear path. For example, Pugsley is stuck in his escape chute and needs a potion to shrink him, but you need 3 different items to make this potion, and it can be a bitch to find all 3 without dying. Then again, if you have the manual, it pretty much lays out for you where you need to go and also gives you hints on each room. Of course, I didn't have it at the time, so I was walking around aimlessly trying to figure things out. But then again, if you ask me, that's the more fun way of doing it. So anyway, as you meander about in the house, you'll be attacked by various things. It's these enemies that really frustrates me. Some of them can be killed by jumping on their heads, but then the other half of the bestiary cannot die. Because of this, you will constantly be taking damage, because avoiding these enemies might be easier said than done. The problem is also that the lives are limited, and there are only 2 continues available. The other big problem with the enemies is that there's no invulnerability time after getting hit. This means that unless you actively move to get out of the way of oncoming enemies, you're going to die very, very quickly. But enemies aren't the only problem. Look at this lair here. This is a room in the crypt, available to obtain cash. I just realized now, as I was writing this review and watching the footage, that you could probably duck underneath the spikes here to get to the top. But instead, when I was playing it, I had to opt just for standing on top of the spikes, waiting for the top bone. If you didn't notice this and didn't have infinite lives turn on, you'd be wasting a lot of valuable health here. Let me continue on with the difficulty, but this time to the nearly impossible jumps that you need to make. In the freezer, you need to traverse multiple platforms, and one wrong move can send you to your death. You can find an umbrella that supposedly slows your descent, and it'll activate randomly in most stages, but it doesn't seem to help other than in the chimney area. In the toy room, you need to navigate narrow blocks that will punch you off if you're standing on them at the wrong time. There's also the tree, which looks strangely like Wizards and Warriors, although not quite as hard. Even areas without platforming can get frustrating. First, the lake. You're forced to use what can possibly be considered the worst swimming controls ever. This right here is me mashing the A button to the end of existence. Gomez just moves so freaking slow that it's impossible to dodge everything. Oh yeah, there's some cheese laying around that restores health, but it doesn't restore nearly enough of it to even be worth it, especially in the lake. The only other good thing about the lake is that there's a hidden room at the end of it, which is pretty essential to finishing the game with enough cash. Finally, one last area of the mansion that I really need to mention before continuing on to other aspects of the game. The fucking rooftop. Getting up there requires you to access the attic, which is basically a small but easy maze that you need to maneuver through. But once you get to the roof, you need to head to the left while dodging birds and bricks that fall off of the roof to collect fog. That's right. Fog. From a fog machine. That's on top of the roof. If this was anything but the Addams Family, I would have questioned the very thing. But alas, I can't because it is the Addams Family. Anyway, the birds aren't too bad, but the bricks? I have a few choice words to say to the bricks. They consist of fuck and you. When you get hit by one, you fall. But not just to the ground, but the ground in front of the mansion. That means that every freaking time you get hit up there, you need to run back in the front door, up the stairs, down the hallways, up and through the attic, and then back to the roof. If you fall again, you're repeating this. Unless you can manage to memorize the 20 plus falling tiles, you may need to use Thing once or twice. Who that makes you invulnerable from all damage for a short time. You only get to use Thing 3 times total, so you better make sure that you reach it and not waste him. Anyway, once you save everyone but Morticia, you need to find the secret river, cross it, and enter a room where your cash is weighed. If you manage to save up $1 million, you can proceed on. If not, well, you're going to be doing some backtracking. In the final room, you have to fight both the lawyer and Fester. First off, what the fuck happened to Uncle Fester? Why are both of his hands in his pockets? And why is he throwing weight things that only minimally look like daggers? You know what? Never mind. I'm not going there. 3 hits and he'll drop, but the lawyer is a bit trickier to hit. His hit detection is simply atrocious, and much worse than anything else you've encountered in the game. It's like, he has to be at the right spot in order to hit him. You can technically walk right past him, but I'm unsure if you can actually save Morticia this way. Anyway, once you save Morticia, you're treated to a scene where Gomez and Morticia are just dancing around. Then you get a really simple message and are taken to the high score tables. Fiend. Yeah, it's pretty lame. You might ask, well, since the game doesn't exactly tell you where to go, does it have any replay value? The answer to that is simply no. Sure, the game allows you to take your own direction, but you still need to get certain items before others. For example, you need to snorkel before setting foot in the lake. Otherwise, your health will drain extremely rapidly. So if you want to give the game a shot, go for it, but don't expect this to be a game that you play more than once. Anyway, let's move on. This background music isn't half bad, but it's marred by its repetitiveness. There's only a few tracks in the game, and most of it is the NES's rendition of the theme song. The music isn't too bad though, so it's not something that you're going to want to mute. But I do wish that the same quality of the music would have went into the sound effects. The most annoying effect is the grating sound of when Gomez gets damaged. This must be where the Game Gear's Predator 2 got the annoying effect, because it's a high-pitched, annoying as shit sound effect that doesn't let up until you're either out of harm's way or dead. Finally, I'm not going to touch on the graphics much, since they're pretty mediocre, but the family members look off, especially when in the pause screen. It looks like each of them has had their faces smashed into a window a few times. Overall, the Addams Family isn't a horrible game, but it's definitely not prime material for a game of the generation. It just has a lot of frustrating elements that really bog the game's fun factor down a few notches. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy a challenge, but this is a bit on the extreme. It's a little bit on the unbalanced side. And it's all due to the difficult jumps and shoddy hit detection. It's worth a playthrough to see how far you can get at the least, but possibly not much more than that. Final score? 6 out of 10. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.